Hello everyone. I hope you enjoyed your day off yesterday. This is the recording for Tuesday, September 3rd. Don't forget that you should be taking notes. This is a brand new document and you will load this week's document into the online high school where it says week 3. So you should be saving a brand new document and your notes from today through this Friday will go in the week 3 Dropbox in Unit 1 in the online high school. Okay, our review starter questions this morning are from last week. So now is the time to pause the recording, look over your notes from last week if you need to, and answer these questions in your notes. Today we are going to be citing evidence that helps explain the influence of religion in the colonies. So we're going to focus in on religion specifically today. Last Friday we briefly talked about the Great Awakening in the 1700s. Today we're going to kind of go back to the 1600s, but we're still focusing in on this topic of religion and how it's going to influence the colonies. We're going to be doing historical analysis and interpretation today because we are going to be looking at different perspectives and different documents of this influence, okay? And it's kind of like a cause and effect. What's going to cause these changes in the colonies, or these religious changes, I should say. And then remember last week I said we had a guiding question that we're thinking about. So I want you to continue to think about what factors, what characteristics make up a community. And as always, remember, learning is getting it wrong and then getting it right. You can't learn until you try. Since our focus today is going to be using the evidence, it's important to talk about the different types of evidence that we use whenever we're working in history. Okay, or this is really true for any subject matter, but evidence always falls into two categories. Okay, evidence is either considered a primary source, or evidence is considered a secondary source, okay? And the easiest way for you to think about this is the primary source is the first-hand account. If I tell you what my birthday is, that's a primary source. That's me telling you about my birthday. It's coming straight from me. Okay, so some examples of what type of evidence might be considered a primary source. Any type of historical document, right? So if you have a government historical document, that would be considered a primary source. Any type of literary work, so like a poem or a novel, that's considered a primary source. Obviously, an eyewitness account. So if there is an interview or some type of eyewitness account where the person who is actually there tells you, that would be considered a primary source. A diary. So if I'm writing in my diary, this is me giving my own thoughts. Therefore, it's a primary source. Field reports, letters, lab studies, basically, again, anything original, right? So if it's the original source, it is a primary source. A secondary source is when it's coming from somebody else. So if you tell me your name and you tell me your birthday, and then I turn to the person next to me and I tell them what your name is and what your birthday is, I've become the secondary source because it's not coming from the original person, it went through somebody. So all of these examples right here are all secondary sources because they're not original. Any type of book, whether it's a textbook or a scholarly book, it's writing about somebody else or something else that happened. So it's a secondary source. Any type of articles, those would fall into a secondary source. And of course, a biography, because it's not an autobiography, if somebody else is writing about a person, that's considered a secondary source. So even something, basically, if it goes through one or more people, it's a secondary source. So when we look at our evidence today, keep in mind that some of the evidence we're going to look at is going to be specifically from the original person, and that will be a primary source. And some of the evidence is going to be basically kind of like textbook paragraphs where they're writing about what happened. The two topics that we are going to investigate and look at the evidence on today are going to be the dissenters, specifically Anne Hutchinson and Roger Williams, as well as the Salem witch crisis. Okay, for today's directions on our activity, you're going to look at different pieces of evidence and you're going to try to find the 3 strongest pieces of evidence that help explain how religion influenced the colonies. So as you look through the different documents, you are looking for the 3 strongest, best arguments that you could use. In your notes, you're going to want to use a chart, something similar to this. You can screenshot this if you want, or you can just recreate it yourself. But you want to make sure that it's very clear in your notes what the topic is, that you have a brief summary, so kind of just the who, the what, the where, what you need to know about the topic. And then you're going to list your 3 strong pieces of evidence. At this point, you're going to want to start pausing the recording so that you can read the different pieces of evidence. So we're starting off here with Salem witch crisis evidence. This is a secondary source because this is a summary. This is people writing about what happened at the witch crisis. So go ahead and pause the recording. Okay, you can also pause the recording for this piece of evidence. Notice at the bottom it gives you a source, and when you look at what the source is, you can tell by both the name and the date that this is a primary source. This is somebody who was actually alive during the time. So go ahead, pause the recording, and read this over. Here is our final piece of evidence for the Salem witch crisis. Again, this one also is considered a primary source. If you look at the date, you look at what it is, this is actual testimony, and it gives you the name as well. So go ahead and read over this evidence and take any notes that you think are important. Now we are going to move on to talking about dissent in the colonies. Specifically, again, we're talking about Anne Hutchinson and Roger Williams. You could either pause and read this on the screen, or if you'd like to go to the actual link, I'll pause it in a moment and put this link up for you if you want to rather just read it from the actual source. Again, this is a secondary source, though, because they are talking about Anne Hutchinson and they are talking about Roger Williams. The next piece of evidence you have to look at is actual testimony from the trial of Anne Hutchinson. So here are 2 excerpts that you can use to read over and learn about what was said at her trial. This piece of evidence, this is actually 2 separate documents, both written by Roger Williams, so they are primary sources. You can pause this and read this over. Now that you've looked at some specific examples of religion in the colonies, let's add to this question we kind of started last Friday. So far, what have we learned about how these colonies are developing? So today we really kind of focused on religion and some events that happen, but how did that change how the colonies develop? Just like last Friday, go ahead, jot down your ideas because you're going to want to use them tomorrow. Great job, everyone. You've made it through another recording. I realize I need to give you the code word. The code word for today is colonies. Colonies, C-O-L-O-N-I-E-S. Colonies is going to be today's code word. Go ahead, go into your online high school, complete the exit ticket, and turn in your code word, and then we will do this all over again tomorrow. Have a great day, everyone.